we have a hell of a paradox coming. We have the best technology yet invented for the distribution of television programming. And it's one that seems to be intent on destroying the economic model of television. Now, if BitTorrent had been invented, say, in 1992 rather than in 2002, we would have come across this problem a decade ago. And it seems that BitTorrent is actually producing an upsurge in the adoption of broadband, that it is in some sense the killer app for broadband adoption, that all of a sudden there's a reason to have broadband. But we have this fundamental disconnect between producer and audience in the economic value chain, and unless we can actually fix that problem, things are going to fall apart. Now, what I want to do in this talk is present a possible value chain that solves these problems, that in fact, rather than being afraid of piracy, says we can harness piracy. That piracy, because it really represents the viewer's desire to get to the programming, is a force that we can harness for economic gain. But before we do that, let's take a look at the current economic model for television in Australia, because it's illuminating and it will show you the kinds of forces that are coming to bear to change the landscape of television. So, I want to familiarize you with a word, if you don't know what it is, oligopoly. Oligopoly is the monopoly of the few, and it describes the commercial television environment of Australia. And it's because of oligopoly that we have a relatively limited broadcast spectrum. We have 3 commercial networks through which most television programming that originates outside of Australia flows through. There are only so many hours in the day. There are only so many prime time hours. So, in fact, the amount of prime time programming that reaches Australia is restricted, you could argue artificially, by the fact that there are a limited number of commercial broadcasters. That means that prime-time commercial broadcast space is the prime real estate, period, in the broadcast hemisphere. And it means, as a side effect, that 10 and 9 and 7 are the most profitable television networks in the world, or among the most profitable television networks in the world. Now, what are the economics behind that? It's very simple. You buy low and you sell high. And the best current example of this is the most popular television program in Australia at present, Desperate Housewives. Now, I want to thank very publicly the television students because they helped me do a lot of my factual research on this next chart. I sat and did some television commercial counting on the broadcast on Monday night of Desperate Housewives, and I counted 18 30-second ads and 20 15-second ads. And we know, because we did a little backstreet work, that the 30-second ads cost between $50,000 and $100,000 a pop. And that means that they're making somewhere between $1.3 and $2.6 million per national broadcast of Desperate Housewives. How much are they paying for the program? Best guess, between $50,000 and $80,000. Now that's good business. All right. How can you maintain that business? Because there's no effective competition. All right. You're probably all familiar with the idea of arbitrage, which is basically taking advantage of the fluctuations in markets so that you can reap an economic benefit. Well, this is an artificial market supported by the fact that there are only 3 commercial television stations. So there can be a very, very broad difference in sale price and purchase price. It's under attack. Now, a study was released back in February which indicated that per capita, Australians already download more television than any other people on the planet. The UK actually in raw numbers outstrips us. But if you just go by population size, Australia downloads twice as much television as the British do. Why? There were a lot of reasons for this. People point at the television programmers and say they're always changing the time of my programs, or they waited 5 years to show the last season of Voyager, or they aren't even going to show this program at all. I have this issue with Arrested Development, which I haven't seen because it started after I left America, but I've been hearing how wonderful it is. So people will go where they need to go to get these programs. We've spent 50 years learning how great television is, learning how great a well-told story can be. And we won't, if we have the technological means, let things stand in the way of that pleasure. We simply won't. And Australians are very forthright about that. Now, an oligopoly can only sustain its position when there's no competitive influence. And there's no commercially competitive influence right now with respect to this oligopoly. But there is essentially a private conflict there. There's a private force that's working against this solitary or singular market influence in television program distribution, which is the individual going out and finding the things they want, downloading them and watching them. And keep in mind that that trend's only going to accelerate as more and more Australians adopt broadband. We have about, what, 20 to 25% broadband penetration in Australia right now. And already, with a much lower broadband adoption than in the UK, we use it far more often for television programming. So the precedent has been set. Behaviors are in play now that are going to be devilishly difficult to pull up. Okay, so let's talk about the economics of hyperdistribution. If we say that, okay, there's this piracy issue over here, and there's this oligopoly over here, how can we as producers work in that marketplace? Point one. The one thing that a television producer wants more than anything else is viewers. Why? Because from viewers, you can get everything else. If you're a TV producer and you can't figure out how to turn viewers into money, you should not be producing television. All right? But the fundamental reason to create a television broadcast is to have people watch it. So if you look at it in that light, through those lenses, then it becomes immediately clear that a hyperdistribution of a television program, which allows millions of people all around the world to see that program, is actually the best possible thing you could have as a television producer, with the exception that we haven't had an economic model that allows you to realize any benefit from it. All right, seems reasonable. So, how do you extract money from the viewers? You don't. Again, you extract money from the advertisers. That's what they're for. Okay, so let me explain the thought process that leads to the beginning of this model. I downloaded, this is before Channel 10 made any announcement that Battlestar Galactica was going to be shown in Australia. It was. I downloaded and watched 13 episodes of Battlestar Galactica. I did.
Previously on Battlestar Galactica.
No, it's only your machine.
And
a robot.
I'm sitting and watching it, and there's 13 hours that I'm watching, and this is the very beginning of the very first episode, and as you can see in the upper left-hand side of the screen, there's something that we're all familiar with, although we don't tend to notice it very consciously. It's a bug. And that bug is telling me the provenance of this program, that this program came from Sky One. Okay, great. And I'm watching 1 hour and another hour and another hour and another hour, and by the time I'm at about hour 7 and I've been staring at that bug quietly, subconsciously for 7 hours, the penny drops. And I realize that I am looking at the most valuable piece of real estate in the human universe. All right? And I'm also looking at the most underutilized piece of real estate in the human universe. It would be like someone taking the point of land that the Sydney Opera House is on and using it for a train depot.